author of Humanity in Space and the co-founder of Foundation for the Future. This will be an interesting conversation.
You are watching Profonde TV with host Phyllis Haynes.
Hello, Tim. It's great to talk with you. How are you?
I'm amazing, Phyllis. Thanks for having me here.
I think you're into something very interesting and very different. Can you give me an idea of what is Foundations for the Future about?
Gladly. So we're a nonprofit built around this idea that until space is boring, it's not going to be real. Nobody founds a company on the ground and says, I'm a mountain company, I'm a swamp company. They say, oh, I'm building a sewing company, a technology company in this area. And space still seems wild and crazy, and so it's not real. And what we're trying to do is remove those barriers, whether they're mental, financial, or the infrastructure piece, and develop ways to make space boring enough to be routine for the rest of us, because I'm tired of not going to space.
Okay, so your company is based on the idea that, well, looking at you, you're young enough to think about going to space. I'm probably not going to get there, but this seems to be, you and Elon Musk have this dream about space. So what's the specific thing? Are you interested in colonizing Mars, for example, or the moon? What's your thinking?
My thinking is, so I grew up in Alaska. I was born and raised in Alaska, and we in the state modeled ourselves as the last frontier. And that always bothered me because I'd look up at the night sky and think, but there's more. And so my dream is, whether it's colonizing Mars, the moon, or elsewhere, it's humanity needs a frontier. We need something next. And that boundary of the new and modernity and civilization has always been what kept society moving forward and advancing. And space is the next promised dream for area to do that. And I mean, all jokes and hyperbole aside, I've got 2 kids. I want a future for them, and they like space. One of them really likes space. Her first art project was a space elevator. And so I'm doing this, and the whole organization is in part an ode to this, that this is their foundation. And how can we set the pieces in motion to be ready when the next generation goes up and out?
Okay, so that's reasonable. But now, there's a great guy named Buckminster Fuller who's no longer with us. He used to say, this is space. He used to say that, we have this whole fantasy of leaving Earth and going into space, but in all actuality, Earth is sitting in space. So can you so when you have your meetings for Foundations for the Future, which you have a rather sizable organization, what do you talk about? What's the common dream? I mean, yours is to expand the horizon for humanity. I got that.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of mistakes in the expansion of our horizon. There's even mistakes going on right now in space.
Mm-hmm.
So are you guys talking about what we ought to be doing to get to space?
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because early on in our formation, there was a lot of talk about how do we, skirt around the things we've done wrong, or not talk about the icky things, whether it's burning rockets to get to space in the least environmentally conscious way of doing it, or the sort of imagery of only old rich white dudes going to space. And I said early on, look, we have to lean into this, that this is not that way. We have a chance to do this right. Every time there's been a frontier in human existence, we've exploited some group, ranging back to when we were coming out of the caves and emerging. We always exploit, and that's what humanity has done. And now we have a chance to change that model and to open up a frontier where the people going have risk, but they're not displacing or taking from someone. And so we do want to figure out what have we done wrong and are doing wrong, and how can we make that right in this new frontier. And more importantly, as you mentioned, we're flying through space on this ball of water and rock. How can we make what's up there work for the rest of us? Because otherwise, we're just jumping into life rafts and running away. And that's the last thing I think we need as a civilization, is to be thinking about. Instead, let's harness this new area of science and human habitation to work for us on the ground, like GPS has done. There's opportunities from space-based solar power to be able to create new ways of generating electricity, places to put industry that can allow us to transform our home into a place more suitable and equitable for the people who are not really interested in going to this new place. And that's fine. Let's make it better for all of us.
That's a profoundly interesting idea. I mean, even Bill Gates has recently announced his desire to create a kind of blockage of the sun to tone down the rays coming here to Earth, warming the Earth. So lots of people are thinking about it. It does seem very far out. What's your friends and family say? Do they think you've lost your mind, or are they on board with you?
It's probably an even split. The ones who think I've lost my mind aren't ever sure that I had it. And the rest are excited and love this idea that there can be a place where those who want to challenge have it. Those who want a place to learn can find it. And most importantly, that the work I'm doing here can open doors for communities that have lost hope. I just got back from Savannah, Georgia, and before that it was Akron, Ohio, talking about how those towns can be in this new space economy. And I like the reaction you had. It was surprise, and that was the same they had. They're like, we're not space towns. It's exactly. But you are good at what you do. Savannah being a huge port, Akron being a manufacturing place, and explaining this is not like the internet where we are going to tell you, go learn how to play a video game, old man, old lady, and then you can be a real player in the economy. No. What we do here on the ground, we need you to be able to do for and in space. So let's take that expertise that is honed over generations, train, work, and let's do that for space. And you can do it now. You can do it big. And the eyes light up. There's excitement. It's like giving kids Christmas presents, because they realize all of a sudden they have the potential to regain the pride of place that they had a generation ago that maybe they didn't think would ever come back. And that's so much fun to be able to deliver that message.
That's a very interesting approach to some very difficult problems. But let me give you the biggest one of all.
Yeah.
Hey, you're talking to a full American. You're a full American. Now, there's been a race for space.
Mhm.
Are you saying that your idea is meant to be the way Americans get a hold of things in space? Or are you talking about a global approach?
Ultimately, it's going to be global because, as we mentioned, we're on this rock flying through space. Anything we do up there is going to affect everybody here on the ground. And so as we're working towards whether it's infrastructure for space, a workforce for space, there has to be an understanding that this is being done and will benefit everyone. We're a US-based organization talking to the US Congress. And so when we talk to our partners in Europe, in South America, we say, look, this is not America only. We're starting here because this is where we live. But we want your views, your ideas, because that's going to make it better. Ultimately, we want a system where there is a free exchange of information, ideas, and commerce, and not one that's dominated and controlled by any single organization or group. And that's what we're scared about when we look at China or Russia, because it's not that we want to beat them and keep them out. I personally am concerned that that would mean we don't have the same opportunity and that our partners around the world don't.
I think that's a great deal of foresight. And like many people, people can't see as far ahead as you do. And that's true. I mean, if we don't move, we may be the ones left out of space or the development of space. Now, there's also the whole area of the militarization of space, because I can remember a couple of presidents, and I'm not naming any names, but who go back even before our last one, wanting to militarize space. I'm sure it's already going on. So what do we do about that? How do we solve that problem? Because funding seems to flow easily. Like if you were the organization to create the best defense system in space, you probably have no trouble fundraising for that.
That is the most true statement that will be said probably this whole time. And you're right. So I personally am a medically retired Army officer, and I talk all the time about how the military is often put in a position where things need doing. I had 5 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and a lot of the time there was, whether it was rebuilding, diplomacy, or training, that was not military specific roles. It needed doing, so we did it. We didn't do it well necessarily, we didn't do it bad. But that's just the mentality of the military, is when we go somewhere, we're gonna do what we can to make things better. And so if we depend on Space Force in this case to build the basic roads, rails, power systems, and sewers of space, they will, but that's not good for them or for the rest of us. We need a military to defend us, just like we need NASA to push the boundaries of what's possible. Now, here on the ground, we've got dozens of agencies doing the rest, whether it's commerce or transportation or agriculture. In space, you've got NASA and Space Force. It's not a lot of options. And so militarization is a concern for me. And one of my common talking points on the Hill and off is there needs to be another organization that helps promote the civil development, not just the science. We need that. But if we tell NASA, you also have to run a hotel in orbit, that takes time away from doing amazing scientific work elsewhere and not helpful. So we need that organization that can come behind NASA and develop what they explore, and that can go ahead of Space Force and create what then they can secure. And that's what's missing, and what we are trying to create through new federal tools for the space economy.
So let's look at some of the positive outcomes. You've answered that really, really well in a thoughtful way. The space station, the International Space Station, has had its own difficulties and it's had its great successes. Have we learned anything from the International Space Station? Have we learned anything that's helping you in your development of your project?
Tons. And I am not the qualified one to even fully go into the things we've learned scientifically. But from an interoperability, international partnership side, that is a model for how space works well. When we started that project, we were talking to the Soviet Union and saying, we're going to live in space. We're going to build a colony in space permanently with you guys that we were trying to kill 10 minutes ago. And that's persisted for decades. And we've added to it, expanded, adjusted, and been able to cooperate in ways that never have we seen on the ground, especially when conflicts have arisen. We've still been partners up there. And I think that is a perfect model of setting up a separate consortium, for lack of a better term, between agencies and organizations devoted to space and saying, look, this is off limits from our fights. Our whatever is going on is going to go on, but this is happening over here. Let's let it. And I think we should be looking to export that down. How can we use that as a model for other important work, whether it's vaccines around the world, whether it's health-related or food security-related issues? Build them off in their own walled place and say, look, this isn't a bargaining chip anymore. We're going to play here regardless. And that's the sort of lessons I think we can take down from that and continue as we build the space economy out.
Well, I see that. So it's the vision of it is really beautiful. That you're thinking about this in ways I haven't heard before. So what's the most, besides Akron and Savannah, Georgia, what's the most surprising responses you've gotten?
Most surprising has been how few people have sort of understood this idea that if you can weld an airplane, you can weld a rocket. And when we have gone like to Montgomery, Alabama, or to Kent, Washington, and talked about how the aerospace manufacturing that those places do directly translates to space manufacturing. And to us, that seemed like a natural progression and next step, but it was revolutionary in their minds that, wow, this is amazing. We can do that. And that shouldn't have been a surprise, but that goes back to space isn't real in our heads. It's this magic place that after you win an Olympic gold medal, you can become an astronaut or some crazy thing like that. But it's not real.
Yeah, self-driving cars were not real either, and now we've got them. Drones weren't so real so recently. So I think your wisdom that we ought to be preparing is pretty sharp. I mean, I hadn't thought about it in these terms. I mean, I think Elon Musk must be thinking about it, but he thinks about everything off the wall. So you never know. But let's go back to that. Who's on board with you? Tell me a bit about the people at Foundations for the Future, because when I look at your website, it's not just Tim Chrisman. It's a lot of people. So who are some of these folks?
Yeah, no, and I have a phenomenal team working with me. So my co-founder, Lila Gislason, is a former Ford marketing executive who has a passion for developing teams and leading change in organizations. And she's been absolutely phenomenal in almost all the messaging you see talking about easing people into the space economy, because in many ways that's a huge shift in our minds, and having her on board helps sort of smooth that transition. Leo Lanos, he is our director in our graphics team. If you look at our site, it looks like a work of art, and that's because it's done by an artist. This man has an eye for design like I have not seen before. He will spend hours and days designing, creating, making, iterating. And if there's one thing I've learned about designers, they say they like feedback, but they don't. It's their art, it's a masterpiece, don't tell him otherwise. He is not that way. He knows, like the rest of us on the team, that we don't have the right ideas yet. We have a start and we need to find the rest. And so he's constantly looking for ways to improve those designs. We've got Lee Steinke, who's heading up our events. She's a former coal and oil mining project lead, and she has come into the space economy wanting to try this. She didn't think this was something she was qualified for, but loved the idea. And we explained, look, nobody's qualified for anything they're doing in a new industry, a new economy where everything's new. What we need and what the rest of the community needs is somebody that's confident, competent, and ready to try. And she has lived that as she has taken our event series from a sort of ad hoc gathering of great thinkers and minds and distilled it into, now it's a monthly conference series. What organization does a monthly conference series? And she is leading the team, putting that together every single month. Absolutely amazing work she's doing. Yeah.
Have you gotten endorsements from any people that we should know about?
No, I don't know that I'm supposed to say that. I think we have a extremely large base of supporters that come to our events. Roughly 300 to 500 show up at our conferences every month. We've got roughly 100 members of Congress who are willing to co-sponsor some of our legislation about these new tools for the space economy. We've got about a dozen companies who have signed on as members of our organization, and another 60 who have signed open letters to Congress. But the thing is, I'm uncomfortable being the spokesperson for our organization because it infers I'm the most important. And so I would feel uncomfortable highlighting any of the endorsements we've gotten because that infers they're the ones that matter. There are people like Joshua Fletcher, who leads a mining company from Australia doing work on a proposal for a moon mission. He's one of our small business members, and we try to make sure that he knows his company is every bit as important as Voyager Space Holdings, one of the larger companies that's our member. And that's hard to do when I talk about Dylan Taylor being a big deal in the space economy and don't mention Joshua in the same breath.
So Tim, this is really exciting to me. You know, people who watch this program know that I'm a bit interested in space exploration. I completely agree with you that we need to continue that mission. I mean, I'm not even embarrassed to say I love Star Trek and Star Trek Next Generation. I know people say, oh gosh, she's a Trekkie, but I think they've done some incredible work to make us think about the right way to be in space. So if people want to play with you or want to be involved, how do they do that?
Well, the first step is going to our website at f4f.space, letter F, number 4, letter F.space. And there you can find out that we really have 3 tracks that we ask people how they want to participate. The first is supporting our efforts, talking with leaders, whether they're state or federal, being a pathfinder in your area for workforce development for the space economy or new ways of financing space companies. The second way is speaking at our events, participating in our monthly conference series. Whether you are an expert or an enthusiast, there's a place there for you, and topics that are almost guaranteed to be related to what you like or are good at. And the final way is we are a member-supported nonprofit. We need financial support, just like PBS says, from viewers like you. And whether it's individual or corporate membership, those are the partners that we need to sustain us as we move forward.
And I can also envision, just like we have science projects in school, it would seem to me that there ought to be some sort of competitions for young people to create a vision for living in space and a vision for working in space beyond rocket ships and satellites. We need someone to think about what the community would look like and how it would function. So I can see some great school competitions coming from your organization. I don't mean to tell you what to do, but I'm excited.
No, that's a fantastic idea. I love it.
Yeah. So what is your vision for this organization? Let's take you out 5 years from now. What would you like to have accomplished by then? In addition to the funds being raised and more participation, would there be any chance that any of the work in space could possibly start? Or do you need to?
Absolutely. So at the end of 5 years, what we see is a 50-state network of community and technical colleges who have space-ready certifications, whether it's welders, machinists, or other technicians, that these schools are networked and producing students that are ready to build for space and in space. And in 5 years' time, you're going to see the first handful of hotels and living spaces going up into orbit. And those places, while they will initially be visited by the rich and famous, need workers, need people to maintain them. And as I like to say, Jeff Bezos isn't going to mix his own drinks, and he isn't going to fix his Wi-Fi router. So we need people who are brave and bold and also willing to figure out how to fix things and make things on the fly, to be that first generation of workers in space. And that starts roughly 5 years from now. And we hope to be at the center of those workers from the trades and career specialties that are building futures for all of us in space.
I want to end on another note because I can hear the cacophony of people saying in my head, oh, but what about Earth? We have so much to do here. What's your answer to them?
If we are doing something in space that doesn't improve our lives on the ground, we're doing it wrong. Everything we do up there should either be a prototype for something better on the ground or directly helping us here. I talked about Joshua, who runs his company in Australia. They have a prototype for a mining rig on the moon. They test it in the desert of Australia, and it pulls water out of the desert. He can pull hundreds of tons of water out of the desert sand every day with his machine. And that unlocks entirely new capabilities for bringing safe, relatively cheap sources of clean water to vast swaths of the earth that don't otherwise have it. And that's the sort of thing we need to be making for space that helps us here.
Thank you, Tim Chrisman. This has been a tremendously good time and a wonderful interview. I think I want to talk to you more as you move along in your work. And please, thank you for your time. And I will post information so people can find out about Foundations for the Future. Thanks so much.